So hello everybody, this is Bhante Joe here, and I'm just here at Endagala in the forest here, and I thought to record a short Owada and meditation for the internet. So I thought that maybe could start with a little bit of meditation, so we can lean forward and arch the spine, and look about 3 feet in front, and close our eyes. And can focus in on the breath, can know when it's coming in, and know when it's going out. If we breathe in a long breath, can just know I'm breathing in a long breath. And if we breathe in a short breath, can just know I'm breathing in a short breath. And can focus in on the breath at the tip of the nose. And when focusing in on the breath at the tip of the nose, can try to make mindfulness as continuous as possible, being aware all the way through the in-breath. As the in-breath turns to the out-breath, all the way through the out-breath, and as the out-breath turns back to the in-breath again. Trying to keep mindfulness as continuous as possible. And if the mind wanders off, can just bring it back to the present moment, to the breath. And before we finish meditating, can spread thoughts of goodwill, wishing may all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can make the mind infinite, can make it unbounded, all the way to the ends of the universe and beyond, in every dimension. May all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. And can open our eyes and do a short Owada for the internet. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tutiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tutiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tutiyampi Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Saṅghaṃ Saranang gacchami. So hope that everybody is having a great day wherever it might be. And yeah, I came out here. It's been a while since I've been to Ndagala, but always a nice kind of place to visit. Very kind of peaceful place. Good vibes. And yeah, so today we got the news, some unfortunate news that a very revered senior monk had passed away. His name is Nyanadipa Bhante. And so not many people in the West may know about him, unless one is a forest monk, in which case one likely knows about him. But he was a monk who became famous for going and staying in solitude in the forest. He's actually known as Denmark Nyanadipa Bhante because he grew up in Denmark. And he was one of the last great monks in the 20th century to ordain at the Island Hermitage, which was once a famous training center for bhikkhus for Western bhikkhus, foreign bhikkhus in Sri Lanka. And so I'd heard about him many years ago when I was a Samanera. I think maybe when I was a Samanera, about Nyanadipa Bhante. He was famous for going into deep patches of forest and I guess building these kutis that had 3 walls. Not sure if I heard about the 3 walls then, but in any event, over time I heard about him. And famous for basically living the life of a solitary hermit. And so when I was a Samanera, this kind of monk came by and I was asking about Sri Lanka. And he was telling me about how, Sri Lanka still has many wonderful forests, which is true. 7-8 years later, I'm here and I'm able to see these forests for myself, which are beautiful places to stay. But after hearing about him, of course, over some time, one wants to meet him and to have some discussion with him, to try to ask him Dhamma questions. And so I wanted to meet him for quite some time, but different things kept coming up. And so was kind of very lucky that before coronavirus, before everything happened, was able to make it here. And a friend of mine who I'd met in Thailand, his name is Nyanasumana Bhante. We met in Thailand for just 1 week, 6 years ago or 7 years ago. And I think it was just about a week. He was at the monastery and we ended up cleaning this Tera Kuti, what they call the Tera Kuti. It's kind of an elder's kuti where the abbot usually stays. Our job was to clean that kuti. And so we were cleaning it, and I told him then, that time I was only 4 vasa or so, that I wanted to go to Sri Lanka and wanted to meet Nyanadipa Bhante. And he said, I'm Bhante Zupatak. and so it was a kind of stroke of good luck. And so then he said, if you want to come to Sri Lanka, over time we had some conversation, I'll help you with everything. And so the amazing thing was that actually 6 years later, I think it was, yes, many years later anyways, it was kind of, he came, I sent him emails, we stayed in touch a little bit, but I was living in Canada and I sent him an email and said, I'd like to come to Sri Lanka, and he basically helped me with everything to come here. And then he was very close with Nyanadipa Bhante, so one time after I'd come here, Nyanadipa Bhante came to Colombo, and that was when I first got the opportunity to meet him. And one of the things that was striking for me about him, I'd been anticipating meeting him for such a long time, was, or one of the things that made an impression on me was his kind of eagerness and willingness to discuss the Dhamma. Maybe not all the time. I mean, it's not like one could just go to his room whenever, but I went there and I had many Dhamma questions that I wanted to ask him kind of over the years, and he really got the sense he was really enthusiastic about discussing the Buddhist teachings, really kind of into it. And he had this reputation for solitude and speaking little, interacting little, but when it came to discussing the Buddhist teachings, if one was asking questions about the Buddhist teachings, if one was asking questions about practice, then he could speak for quite some time, and so I went there and he said, come again at 7 p.m. and that was the beginning of kind of a wonderful opportunity to hear Dhamma discussions with him. And not long after that, he ended up coming to the monastery where I'm staying, which is Bhadeka Vihari, and he just wanted to come for a short visit. And again, I felt this felt like really great fortune for all the monks here, because actually I don't think he'd been back to this monastery for many years, for maybe 10 years or so, or longer. I think last time he was here was 2006 or 7, and now it's 2020, so maybe 12 years. Don't quote me on that, but about that time. But in any event, he came again, and again he was very happy to discuss the Dhamma, very eager to discuss, maybe not eager, but he gave monks the opportunity pretty much every day when he first came. And then later he left to another monastery and came back, and he would give the opportunity to discuss the Dhamma with him every week. And so coming to speak with him, coming to kind of discuss the Dhamma with him, it had a kind of magical, almost like a magical quality to it, because here we were in the middle of a deep forest, and in the middle of a deep forest, and in a kuti there, and he would sit at the kuti, and we'd be in this middle of this forest and be sitting around him on the floor asking questions about the Buddhist teachings. And one started to get the impression that one was really in the presence of maybe one of the foremost sutta experts in the world. I mean, there are sutta experts in the world, no question, but one of the foremost sutta experts in the world. One would sometimes ask him questions about the suttas, and he would quote the Pali for the exact sutta that one was asking about. He seemed to know the Sutta Pitaka very well. But it was also balanced by a kind of a practical knowledge that he had from his own meditation practice, from his own experiences living alone and practicing alone. And so this was a kind of great gift and a great opportunity, but it wasn't the only kind of teaching he gave. It was kind of one of the teachings he gave was this kind of explicit verbal teaching. We would ask him questions, call it kind of Dhamma discussion, and he would answer them. But the other teaching was basically the example of his life, kind of basically, the life that we heard about. I only met him when he was here, which was relatively late in his life, but even still, despite his failing health, he went to this kuti in the middle of the forest, and he would walk, I think it might have been close to 1 kilometer every day, and was determined. He didn't want any help and would stay alone. And as his strength failed, he just gradually reduced where he would stay. Then he moved to another kuti and another one. So when he first came, we got the news that he unfortunately had terminal cancer. Kind of originally we'd hoped that there had been hope that it had receded, but He had a terminal cancer. And so it seemed that in his last days, from what I could gather, he, and others might have different impressions, but that he wanted to devote himself to the Dhamma. And this was another one of his teaching, basically is seeing the way that he lived in his last moments, and basically the same way he'd lived his whole life, kind of desiring solitude and helping his fellow monks in the Sangha, helping them with Dhamma discussions, helping them with advice, and helping them with his example, with his presence in the monastery. And so after discussing with him for some time, one of the things, if one is a monk, one tends to hear about Sri Lanka. There's kind of different, different kind of qualities that the forest traditions of different countries have. But Sri Lanka is kind of known for having this quality of forest tradition of living alone in solitude in the forest, kind of not so much a teacher tradition, but more a kind of independent tradition, living solitary, living relatively independent, and practicing on one's own with the guidance of the suttas. Not exclusively, but at least among Western monks, this is what it's been famous for. Or this is one of the things it's been famous for. And after discussing with him for a while, it came to the understanding, or came to the feeling that Nyanadipa Bhante was one of the big influencers in at least this modern era, at least the 20th century, the 21st century, of solitary living in the forest, and that he had made a contribution to the Sri Lankan forest monastic culture, and kind of this culture for which it's now becoming very famous, or maybe not very famous, but this culture for which it's now becoming well known, I guess, among the forest monks, was perhaps something that he was a great influencer for, something that he helped to build a culture. And so thinking about him, thinking about his life, I get the impression that he was one of the great monks of our era, one of the monks who made a large contribution to the Sangha, and kind of not just in his teachings, but through his example of his life, and through his life, through the culture that he helped to build, and building all these various solitary kutis in Sri Lanka, so that now other monks have the opportunity to follow in his footsteps. So of course the last teaching that all these great monks give is that they too pass away. So there's nothing that's permanent, that's lasting, except nibbana, nothing in samsara that one can rely upon. And so the time comes even for great beings who've made a great contribution, beings who've devoted themselves to the Dhamma, that they too have to pass away, that they too have to leave behind their khandhas. This happened to the Buddha, and it happens to everybody. All of his disciples, however great, and everybody that we know, everybody that we interact with, everybody that's born and will be born, everybody is subject to death. So this is one of the last things that one can learn from these beings when they go, is that the day will come that we'll have to follow in their footsteps. And to follow in their footsteps well, one can practice the Dhamma, one can practice the Buddhist teachings, because there's an enormous difference between somebody who's a great follower of the Buddha, who's understood his teachings. There's an enormous difference between their death and the death of an ordinary person, we call it kind of putujana. The difference is that for somebody who's understood the Buddhist teachings, who's penetrated the Buddhist teachings, who's gained a foothold in the Dhamma, they don't have to fear death that much, because at most they get reborn 7 times, and then they make an end to suffering. They've entered a stream that leads one way, a stream that leads to the deathless. And so their fear of death becomes much less. This is an enormous difference from ordinary beings in the world who may be uncertain where they go afterwards. So whatever time one has left, wherever one is in one's life, at whatever phase one is at in one's life, this kind of great teaching that everything that arises is subject to ceasing, is something that one can keep in mind. Something that one can keep in mind to spur oneself on. Something that one can keep in mind to remind oneself. And something that one can keep in mind to guide one's life to what's really important. Guide one's life to the practice of the Dhamma. Guide one's life to its understanding, and guide one's life to its realization. Because at the end of one's life, one can't take any houses, any cars, any relatives or siblings with one. What one takes with one is one's kamma. And so one of the best things is to practice so as to have one's feet firmly on the Buddhist path, so that one can generate good kamma now and eventually find the ending of kamma, which is the ending of suffering. And in this way, one can truly walk in the footsteps of the great beings that have come before. Great beings like the Buddha, his Arahant disciples, and we can also imitate and walk in the footsteps of Nyanadipa Bhante, our great monk here in Sri Lanka, who recently passed away. So homage and respect to Nyanadipa Bhante for his life, for his example, and for his legacy, the legacy of practice he's left us here in Sri Lanka today. Okay, so leave that for reflection, and hope that everybody has a great day wherever it might be, and wishing you all the best until next time.